It's alive! Alive! This is a time of year, spring, as I record this, when there's a lot of excitement usually about Kickstarters, as the year kind of tumbles into preparation for Gen Con. Kickstarter madness seems to take over the gaming community, and that's great. But it's not always about bidding and pledging and adding to pledges and stretch goals. Sometimes it's about receiving things, and this has been a fantastic time of year, at least for fans of Ubiquity, to get cool stuff from last year's Kickstarters. Triple Ace Games has recently released Leagues of Gothic Horror. This is out. It's out for everybody in PDF. Backers are waiting for their print copies, those who ordered them, and backers received the digital files quite a bit earlier. This will be a quick look at the book in case you missed the Kickstarter. Leagues of Gothic Horror takes Triple Ace Games' Leagues of Adventure game for the Ubiquity role-playing system by Exile Game Studio. It takes this game in a new direction. Now, it's not entirely new. Leagues of Gothic Horror was touched on in the Globetrotter's Guide to Gothic Horror when the line was first launched a few years ago. This was a much smaller PDF-only supplement. Leagues of Gothic Horror is in print and PDF. It is a very detailed source book, and it runs 160 pages. 160 pages filled cover to cover, densely packed with the author's fantastic writing. The table of contents is full and easy to navigate. The pages themselves, there's limited art, but mostly it's text. It's a very, very, very big book filled with advice for game masters, new templates like sample characters to try on if you want to quickly get into a night of gaming, genre-appropriate talents, flaws, archetypes, and this sort of thing, plus weird science and the ability to take on different types of characters than we have seen before. For example, imagine in a story based around supernatural threats in Victorian England, your character could actually be a ghost. I wear the blade I bore in life. As is usual for a product from Triple Ace Games, the PDF is fully bookmarked from the table of contents and from your reader of choice. There's a printer-friendly switch and all of those nice bells and whistles. They're taking your needs into account. It's a very easy PDF to use, which I appreciate. Now, what's in it? There's an essay on what is Gothic Horror, and then what specifically is Leagues of Gothic Horror. Then it switches to what sort of rules you can expect and a guide to using the book. Leagues of Gothic Horror is a supplement, after all, for Leagues of Adventure. You'll need both, or at least this game and another Ubiquity core book in order to run it. If you're planning on setting your game in the Victorian era, then having Leagues of Adventure makes the most sense. The first chapter is called Lights in the Darkness and presents new archetypes for play. These are the Alienist, the Gypsy, the Mentalist, the Monster Slayer, the Mystic, the Occultist, the Outcast, the Police Officer, and the Soldier. New skills presented in the game are Academics, Alienism, Focus, Magic. There is a sidebar on creating ghost characters. There are new talents presented: Alternate Identity, Dowser, Exorcist, Fortune Telling, Lunacy, Magical Aptitude, which doesn't exist in Leagues of Adventure by itself. This is the magical aptitude we know and love from other Ubiquity games. Medium, Mentalism, Psychic Resistance, rabble-rouser, second sight, stable, and unflappable. Some of these talents are only new to Leagues of Adventure. Some of them are new. New flaws presented. As usual, these are physical, mental, social, or miscellaneous. We have the albino. We have, for mental, we have cautious, disbeliever, faint-hearted, and high-strung. Social, distrustful, doomsayer, masochism, meddler, nemesis, righteous, and sadism. For miscellaneous flaws, we have the weirdness magnet, and with the use of the term magnet, Hex players already know what this is talking about. For new leagues, there are a ton, and there's also more advice on making your own, especially occult-centered leagues. Very helpful advice, particularly with its focus on giving them colorful and evocative names. We have the Ancient Order of Druids, the Circle of Mediums, the Cunning Folk, the Frankenstein Club, the Ghost Club, the Golden Circle, the Hellfire Club, the Holy Brotherhood, the Magician's Circle, the Ministry of Unusual Affairs, the Society for Rational Explanations, the Society for the Advancement of Science and Technology, the Society of Metaphysicians, the Tarot Club, the Vengeance Guild. All right. So there's lots of different hooks to help you get into the era, get into the sense of how you're going to support your character, how you're going to connect your character to the game world and to each other, how you can find a place of support to run to, people to worry about offending, that sort of thing. Leagues in Leagues of Adventure, and by extension Leagues of Gothic Horror, are extremely important, and definitely color play, and as you're building and developing your characters, help you navigate your way through things like appropriate talent choices, the gradual effect of play on resources and the people that you know and interact with. So it's nice that there are so many to choose from and guidelines for building your own. There's more gear appropriate for ghost hunters or monster hunting if you want to go in that direction, or tracking down more mundane threats such as, armoring or protecting yourself against a deadly knife-killing serial killer prowling through the fog-shrouded streets of London, and that sort of thing. There's a large section on weird science. Leagues of Adventure already has a lot of stuff on weird science, and you can get that in print also in the Weird Science Compendium. But there's a ton of stuff found here. Dr. Jekyll's serum, for example, dream recorders, ectoplasmic bullets, in case you might want to call someone. The emotometer, or the emotometer, the etheric dampening field engine, and on and on and on. Great use of adjectives, very evocative names, and sometimes very crazy inventions that will take your game in a very specific direction when they get invented by the players, or you meet the whacked out inventor who has made them. All kinds of stuff. We have the alienist, the ghost hunter, the ghostly musketeer, the local Bobby, the natural empath, the psychic detective, the seeker of lore, the vampire hunter, and a bunch of sample henchmen to round things out in terms of ready-to-go characters and templates. AAA Games is always good about providing you with sample henchmen to speed up play. All of that, believe it or not, is in Chapter 1. It really is a densely packed book. The pages are filled with information, and in the writer, Paul Wade Williams, affectionately known as Wiggy, his inspiring and comfortable style to read through and just enjoy reading again and again. Second chapter is Concerning Matters Arcane and Metaphysical. This brings in Ubiquity's standard horror mechanic. There has been a new mechanic developed for a more modern and adventure-oriented game called Quantum Black, where more resilient sanity might be required to match up with the genre. Here we have the standard horror mechanic, which I like quite a bit, and how it works. Then it gets into a detailed examination of mental disorders and phobias, and dealing with regaining, perhaps, your sanity. It also introduces something called corruption for dealing with black magic, and then slowly takes us into the magic system. The mechanics of using magic are those which are found in Hollow Earth Expedition, but the material presented here is unique to Leagues of Gothic Horror. All kinds of rituals, tons and tons of rituals, to use either as written or as inspiration for developing your own. Then, one of the things that really got me excited when I had my early look at the project was a whole boatload of magical texts. And it goes into the basics of magical texts, how to describe them, what you can expect to find in them, the problems of using and translating them, so that you can do more than have these things be loot or as a MacGuffin. They can take on some of the burden of bringing the atmosphere. Wiki's done some great stuff with this, and given mechanical bite to the use of magical text, which players of Call of Cthulhu might be familiar with, that these texts have a real impact on your character and the environment in which they're investigating or navigating as characters. So all kinds of texts, the Alexandria Codex, the Barrett Letters, being the true method by which life was given to that which had none, and on and on and on. Great stuff, crazy titles, and detailed descriptions of what's in them and how it can be used or misused. Scrolling through all the books. Then we get into mentalism, which we've seen before, and extrasensory perception, mind over matter, which allows things like healing and psychic surgery, telekinesis, telepathy, all kinds of things to have maybe a Houdini-inspired investigation or debunking of the occult, or desperate search for answers. Perhaps a lost loved one or a beloved ancestor is out there somewhere, and we can help them. Buckets filled with, probably not buckets, crates, ancient and atmospheric crates filled with relics. Scrolling down through all of the amazing relics, all of which that have been described, each one with some kind of hook or story seed buried within it, so you can just look at it and go, either for a series of games or as the basis for a whole campaign. Really inspiring stuff here. And that's just the second chapter. The third chapter, we get into things that go bump in the night. All kinds of threats, from minor little threats like bats up to really terrible stuff. And then a fairly lengthy section on ghosts. And this section reminds me that there is more to this Kickstarter than just this book. There's more to it than Leagues of Gothic Horror. Leagues of Gothic Horror's Kickstarter produced 2 other books, and then was followed by a subsequent Kickstarter for the Guide to London, the Globetrotter's Guide to London, and that further unlocked another League of Gothic Horror supplement. So, in addition to this book, PDFs are out there and will soon be released for backers for mummies, black magic, and apparitions. Even more in-detail material about ghosts, all bundled together into one easy-to-find resource. So, possibly, if the stars align, we'll see the 2 remaining volumes that Wiki has prepared: werewolves, or lycanthropes, and vampires. Just as detailed as the amazing book on mummies, the amazing book on black magic, and the incredible book on apparitions. Still yet to come. But as we get through all of the powers of ghosts and the attitudes of ghosts and the types of ghosts and the ways to play ghosts, we then get into other types of creatures, like animated scarecrows and creatures back from the dead and types of vampires and the Wendigo and on and evil mortals and helpful mortals, and a ton of period-specific characters to meet, interact with, possibly oppose, possibly run to for assistance. One of my favorite is the torch-wielding peasant. Ton of stuff in here. Then we get into cults, covens. Chapter 4, Dark Places. Places to take your game with story seeds, descriptions, and information so that you can very easily have one of those montage scenes, you know, where the characters hop on the Orient Express and are plowing their way across Europe. And, you know, where do they wind up? Maybe Austria, Hungary, Transylvania, Egypt. Generic locations, things like assassins, asylums, castles, forests, graveyards, this sort of thing. Bringing in all of the elements of the genre all together in an easily digestible format so that you can prepare and improvise on the fly. We've got Germany, we've got Great Britain, we've got Romania, Scandinavia, the United States of America. And that brings us to Chapter 5, The Nature of Darkness. We get into how to run, how to evoke Gothic horror, how to bring about fear and suspense, how to use lists of strange events, using villainous characters. We get into morality, we get into combat, common plot elements and themes, that sort of stuff. And there's still more. We've only just now arrived at Chapter 6, and Chapter 6 is one of the many things which sets this sourcebook apart from others of its ilk. Maybe not all the time, but very often I feel that books that aim to help you deal with a genre or a particular setting offer a lot of theoretical advice, or they offer a lot of in-game fiction and hope you can kind of figure it out for yourself. But when it comes down to offering something practical that lets you take your rule set and bring this stuff to life smoothly, that can be lacking. Well, not in this supplement. Chapter 6 lays out different tones in which this can be played, like comedic, for example. And if you were going to undertake that, how would you deal with weird science and magic? And how would you deal with character creation? Right? If you were going to go for something much more horrific, where real threat of death is on the line in any kind of brush with the supernatural, how would you set that up mechanically? And on and on. So as you go through the preceding chapters, you're armed with things to use, places to use them, ways to think about them, ways to describe them, how they intersect with the fiction and the society of the era that's being represented. And then in Chapter 6 it says, okay, so you're going to play this way. Here are some options, and here are the tools to make it happen. And it doesn't stop there. Now, this is the last chapter in the book. There are only 6. But after it establishes how to, in practical terms, establish the style of your particular game, it then moves into providing 4 sample campaigns. And then it provides you with 19 story seeds. And if that weren't enough, it then goes into a brief overview of what is called Gothic history. So from 1889 to 1899, some ideas about the history of the period in this horror context. Then moves into a who's who of occult and gothically horrific individuals that characters might meet or interact with or be inspired by or whatever, which is fairly lengthy. And then to ice the cake, in case you felt like somehow something was still missing from all of this, there's the reference section, which includes not only purely reference material, but also fiction in terms of literature, movies, television, and audio plays that inspired the author both in his own personal life and as resources for putting together this fantastic and lengthy 160-page supplement on the Victorian era Gothic horror. So, obviously, I'm kind of excited about this. Don't think of this as a review. I'm definitely now far too close to the material to be properly unbiased in a critique. This is something that is aimed directly at a gamer like me, and I got a sneak peek at it, and it's been living, back here in my head for months, and I haven't been able to share it with anybody. So it's nice. It's fantastic that it's out there, and game masters and games can now thrill to the horrors that Wiki has put together for them, and has provided the tools so they can bring in their own influences and interests and build their own horror campaigns using Ubiquity and using Leagues of Adventure. So this is a look at the PDF release for Leagues of Gothic Horror. When the print edition arrives, we'll do another short look at it just to show how it looks in the real world. Okay, thanks for watching.